Hello, Qassim instructors and administrators. My name is Michael McCarthy, and I'm excited to introduce you to this continuing video series to help deepen your understanding of the principles of format. We're going to be providing these as recordings that you can view at your own leisure and to help just help you work with these concepts more effectively. So we're real excited to be offering this to you today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McCarthy, and please give us your feedback on these sessions after you had a chance to listen. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Bernice McCarthy. It's a good thing to be meeting a lot of you at last and having you take a look at what we look like here and how our office is set up. Dr. Faisal asked us to do a special piece on concepts because it's so vital to format. And so I put together something that is a deeper look at it to have you see the best possible way to understand it, I think. So here we go. Okay, here we go. This picture is a good example of how conceptualizing takes in all the things you know and that you understand about your students and put it together into some essence of the content that you can use to connect to your students. So take a look at creating concepts here. How do you do this? Well, you can mind map it from the content and your sources of your content. You can look for the parts to connect. You can choose big ideas that encompass these connections. You can prioritize them. You can look at it and come back to it and look at it again, and then choose one concept that you decide will convey the essence of the content and, really importantly, will appeal most to your students in the time that you're working with them and in the place that they live. What criteria creates the value of the concept you choose? Well, the answer to that is it's the connection to the students. See, don't think primarily of what's the essence of this content. Think of what's the essence of this content in connection to your students. Okay? And that depends on three things. What's your purpose for them? What do you hope will happen if they get this? Who are they anyway? If you're going to connect to them, you would have to know who they are and the place and time that you're working in. Okay? So your purpose for them, who they are, where and when. So truly think context. The context is everything. Okay, so your purpose for them is to know the content, or is it to use the content skillfully? Or is it to adapt and shape it so that it integrates in their personal real lives? Then your students themselves. How old are they? What level of understanding are they in this material you're teaching? What about their background? Do they have backgrounds where they were supported to take risks and to try new things, for example, or not, which would make a difference in those students? And what are their current living situations? Are some of them really having a tough time and having to work hours while they're in school, and so on and so on? Okay, and then where are you all? What historic time are you living in? And are you accounting for that when you come up with the best possible concept for those particular students? Okay? So, how do you create these personal connections for the learners? There is no other way except to begin with a concept that encaptures the essence of the content and turns them on, engages them. Okay? Remember, there's a ton of content out there. I tried to come up with a forest that looks impenetrable, so you'd need a machete to get through it for this picture. Remember, there's a ton of content out there. The way you conceptualize will open that path for them. See, that's what you're after, okay? Why do you create these personal connections for the learners? Why not just say, here it is, it's your job, learn it? Why? Because you want it to have meaning for them. So it will be learned, it will be enduring, so they may find meaning is the reason that you would conceptualize your content. All right, let's try one. Now, I understand you all may not know this movie of The Wizard of Oz, but I can still make the point Most of my audiences would know the movie, okay? And so I then say, what do you think the concept is? Which one would you choose and why? And of course I get a variety of answers. And you say, wait a minute, Bernice, isn't there just one right answer? No, of course not. The concept you choose depends on what you're doing, where in the content, and who the students are. So when I do this, I get courage for one answer, I get perseverance, friendship, diversity, homesickness, and you say, well, which is the right one? Was there one best answer? And of course, the answer is no. There is no one best answer. Oh, yeah, but I mean, if you really know the content, there are professionals who will tell you what are the big ideas in physics, for example, in number theory and math. What are the big ideas? Of course, there are. And there are concepts that we all need to know as professional teachers. But in terms of what you're trying to do with these students, you have room, you have leverage to decide which of these concepts and the way you frame it and contextualize it would fit with those students. You see, that's what you're after. So when you look at the format wheel, and I assume I'm talking to people who've been trained in format, and you know what your content is down there in quadrant 2 left, you have to determine a concept in essence that you can begin with to get your students excited about you be teaching them when you get down to 2 left. Okay, so what I did was I came up with examples in literature, earth science, mathematics, and music to explain this, okay? So here are 3 possible concepts that you might come up with if you were teaching Shakespeare's play, Macbeth, in a literature class to your students. You might say, I'm going to use corruption of power. Well, that's fine. No, I'm more going to deal with the relationship between cruelty and masculinity that was in that play. No, I'm going to deal with the difference between a king who exercises in kinship and one who exercises in tyranny. So all 3 of those concepts, and they could all be equally good. So let's take a look at them up close. What would you do in quadrant 1, right mode, to connect to your students if you chose one of those 3 instead of the other? Well, if you're teaching in the United States and you decided you were going to use the corruption of power as your concept for Macbeth, it might be a good thing to choose the current politics in the United States as a beginning. You could have an activity happen or an experience happen that would be an indication or a persona or a skit or something that would have to do with the current politics in the USA before you get them down to look at the corruption of power as shown in Macbeth. You see what I'm saying? If you chose the relationship between cruelty and masculinity, and you were working in the United States, of course, say you were working in segregated schools with boys and girls together, you might choose an all high school girls class to begin an incident where there would be some indication of that kind of thing. You see, the difference between kinship and tyranny. You could start with something, if you were using that would have to do with how self-aware is a leader about his task in leadership. You would begin with some kind of an activity that would deal with a leader trying to make some distinctions between kinship and just being totally a tyranny, you see? So you have to decide what's the best connection for your students. Now, my examples may not be anything in what you folks are working with, okay? But if I were teaching Macbeth, I would be considering those concepts. Let's look at earth science and volcanoes. You might choose in earth science that you would use the effects of volcanoes, what they actually do to the earth, okay? And what would be your opening? You would have something that would have to do with the fact that volcanoes have both positive and negative effects. So you would come up with some activity, okay, where they'd be finding something that was present on the earth as a result, a positive thing, as a result of volcanic activity earlier. You see, you would fool with those kinds of things. If it were causes that you wanted to teach volcanoes just from causes, then of course you'd take a look at Yellowstone Park. You'd begin with that. You'd have them begin there. Of course, one of the largest volcanoes on the earth. Or you would do population issues that have to do with volcanoes. See, then you would deal with Pompeii, warning systems, a government responsibility, biosphere changes in the whole earth when one volcano goes off in Italy, for example. Okay, so what's the best connection for your students if you were teaching earth science and volcanoes? Here's mathematics, statistics, and probability. You might choose uncertainty as your concept. You might choose chance. You might choose universe. Universe. How many is enough in statistics and probability? What is the universe? When do you have enough to make a point? See, chance, statistics as proof. If you were deciding chance was it, then you'd have something happen. They could be doing heads and tails with coins and have some hypothesis and see if they could prove it or not. You see, and of course they wouldn't be able to prove it, which would be a great way to begin, wouldn't it? And uncertainty, certain things, that happen or don't happen. What about if you're teaching music? The connection of music and humanness, the form of music, the sonata relationship to the rest of the world. Okay, so what is the bridge? If the concept is the big idea, and the content is what you're lecturing on and delivering, what is this bridge that I keep talking about? It's the relationship between the content, what you're supposed to be teaching, and the concept, the big idea, the big umbrella. And so as a relationship between those two things, think about it, it's the outcome. Why is it the outcome, you ask me? It's the outcome because if you're teaching a big idea, the concept, and you're using a certain amount of content to teach it, why are you teaching it? So there would be a learning result from it, correct? Yes. The bridge is your outcome. It's the learning results. Okay? Now, this slide, I certainly hope all of you know the story of Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, it's an old fairy tale. It goes back hundreds of years, and she's got a little basket of goodies, and she's going through the woods to visit her grandmother, and on the way, she runs into the wolf. And, of course, the story ends that when she gets to her grandmother, he's pretending to be her grandmother with a little cap on his head in bed. He's already eaten her, and so on. All right. So what would be the concept? Let me say that I'm teaching kindergartners, little ones, right? I'm reading the story of Little Red Riding Hood. What's the concept? Stranger danger. Be careful of strangers, okay? Well, Bernice, what would be the bridge? What would be your outcome? I mean, if you're using the story of Little Red Riding Hood as your content, and your concept is watch out, little ones, when strangers approach you, what possible outcome would you hope to have? Well, I put as a question mark for you to defense tactics. What would you teach little ones about strangers that wouldn't frighten them to death? You see, it's the outcome. All right? There's a relation. Now, look at the number 6 I have on top here of this. Use the 6 trick when you're writing a lesson plan. Get your concept in your umbrella at the top. Put your content down there, at least some little description of whatever it is, okay? And then you figure out your bridge. And after you have it, try this. Draw a 6 in your mind, and starting with the concept at the top, say, there's a relationship between the concept and the content, and you pull that 6 around and say, and it ends up pointing to the bridge and say, and that relationship is the outcome. The learning outcome, okay? Here is a beauty. You folks will love this. They're teaching toxicology, the study of the adverse effects of chemicals on living organisms. Look at what this lovely, lovely person did with his format in toxicology. There's his content at the bottom. And look what he's chosen for a concept. Do no harm. What's the bridge? Well, let's try the 6 trick. There's a relationship between doing no harm in pharmacology and understanding symptoms and the toxic things, and that relationship is dose and its effect. That is one of the best I've ever seen as an example of how to use the Format 6 trick and use the umbrella to do your concepts. So now once you have this, okay, what image? You know that in quadrant 2 right, which is where your image comes in and your bridge comes in, if dose and its effects, see, the teacher would have to have some kind of a visual thing happening in the 2 right that has to do with dosage and its effects. You see? Okay. So why is the image so important? That bridge so important? Well, because the concept is the key to the lesson, and imaging the relationship between the concept and the content directly involves the student with a powerful brain strategy, the imaging. The image is your learning results. So the combination of the experience at the top and the content and then the bridge. And this one is a teacher teaching scientific inquiry, the process of scientific inquiry. That's what her content is. She wants to teach these students, they're high school students, how to do a really solid job of scientific observation and inquiry. So she chooses as her concept, lovely one, wonder. And it's lovely because it has 2 meanings. It has to do with curiosity and it has to do with awe, which is what science is all about. It's just beautiful. Okay. So what did she come up with for her bridge? Well, this relationship between wonder and scientific inquiry, and that relationship is progress in the world in science. When you put those together, now look at what a beautiful, that's really a beautiful lesson. It is conceptually cohesive. It's a beauty to look at. It makes me smile just to see it. It's so perfect. All right. Okay, here is the last slide. We had a little break in there. We apologize for that. I want you to understand that the right mode steps in format. Take a look at them. That's right mode 1, right mode 2, right mode 3, right mode 4. Look at this. The concept is experienced in right mode 1. The concept is visualized in right mode 2. The concept is engaged. The student gets engaged with it in quadrant 3 right mode, and it's integrated in quadrant 4. Now let's look at the left mode things. The concept is experienced and then reflected on. The concept is visualized and then you deliver the lecture. It's examined and studied. And then it stays left brain, remember? Then it's practiced and then it's engaged, and then whatever they decide to do to engage it, it's then polished and edited, and then it's done. Okay, I'm going to close with these last 4 slides. Concept questions for you in quadrant 1. Will the concept you choose create meaning for your students? How will you make it an experience, and will it be powerful enough that they will reflect on it seriously? Quadrant 2. What activities will you create that will get your students to represent the concept nonverbally? How interactive can you make the lecture? Your 2 left. Any outside speakers available? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how passionate are you about this content? And if it's less than 5, get help. Get somebody into the class who's passionate about the content. Quadrant 3, how will you differentiate the practice, affording enough varying ways for them to master it so everybody gets it? Can you assist the students in finding evidence of the usefulness of this learning in their real world? Is there a possible way to have them attend a suitable degree of expertise that they could watch it being done outside the classroom as well? Or they could actually go out and get more expertise themselves outside the classroom doing this? And then quadrant 4, how will your students express their knowledge and their know-how of this material? What expression form have you chosen, or are you giving them for options? And will they be able to take the knowledge and skill of this concept and its attending material in their own adaptation out in their own direction? Thanks so much for listening. I certainly hope this was helpful. Any questions, just email me anytime, bernice@aboutlearning.com. And good luck with your students.